Is there a link between the encounter at the edge of death and the encounter with the unknown craft in the night sky? A convergence, if you like, of two great mysteries of what it is to die and also whether we are alone in the universe. Let's examine this intriguing intersection here on Things Visible and Invisible. Mindy, the last time we spoke, you gave a very compelling and a very moving account of your own near-death experience. And you left us kind of hanging, you were in this dark void. You were very concerned not only about yourself, but about your husband and your children. So we better pick the story up exactly where you left it. This void that you're in, did it seem, no pun intended, did it seem an eternity?
It did. That's one thing that I try to put into words as well, is the expansiveness of it. At some point, well, let me pick up where I had left off, because as I was sitting there praying for my husband and kids, while I'm on the other side, I'm praying for them and worried for them, but I'm also worried that there has been some kind of separation, because I wasn't immediately in heaven and I wasn't immediately greeted by my Savior. Everything that I had hoped for my entire life wasn't coming to be over on the other side. And so I felt so raw and so bare. That's whenever I became aware of the magnitude, like you were asking, of what I call the source all around me. And I try to explain it as like a primordial state, almost like things could come into being, into a spark at any moment. And it spanned from beginning to end. But what was so soul crushing for me was that I was almost put into like an invisible box. I was separate from all of it. So I'm there contemplating, never seeing my husband and kids again. I'm grieving their loss. And then I become painfully aware that I'm separated from everything in existence. I don't know how to even begin to explain the despair that a person feels being put into that. And like I had discussed in the last episode, you can't twiddle your thumbs. You don't have any physical being. You can't turn on a TV. You can't turn on a music or a radio or something to take your mind off of it. You're stuck there. You are your thoughts. You are your emotions. And you just have to sit with it. So in this, I didn't have a life review. I instead started kind of reviewing myself and examining myself. And I'm wondering, why have I been forsaken? Why am I cast out and cast aside? I didn't understand. And I started looking at how I had treated others. I'm looking back through events in my life, and I always showed people love. I never lacked in loving others. And so again, I didn't understand. And so it came to me, what about yourself? And so I start reviewing, have I loved myself? And the answer was a resounding no. And I want to be very clear here. This isn't an issue of ego. This isn't building myself up. This was almost a self-hatred, a self-loathing, where I felt so unworthy and I felt so under everybody. I felt just a lack of self-love throughout my entire life. Once I realized that, I thought, oh no, this has held me back from so many things in life. I haven't done what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that it held me back from helping others the way I was supposed to. As soon as I realized that, I became aware of a presence that was kind of behind me on the left side. And he came up behind me and he said, "You're not going to be here forever." And I describe it almost as a sterile kindness. It felt like he was breaking rules to speak to me, because I was lost in despair. And it was almost like he was intervening, because he's like, "Okay, you've been through enough. You're enough, wake up, move on, because you've got things to do here." Um, so he said, "You're not going to be here forever." And instantly I was just like, okay, there's someone else here, and I'm not going to be alone. I'm not here forever. And then he started pulling me. We sailed off to the left. And as we did, I saw this purple glow in the distance, and I'm looking at it. And as it comes closer and closer, I see these pink lines in it, and it keeps coming more into focus. It looks like a nebula. It's beautiful. And as I get closer, it's just giving off this enormous love. And my impression of it was just almost a conglomeration of souls and the best of humanity. And I'm not some pie in the sky person normally, but it was just, it was so important. And he showed it to me, and we sat there, and he said, "This is the fabric of humanity." I'm getting chills just talking about it again, even almost 10 years later. And it felt like he had revealed so much to me. And I just had the thought, like, I want to go to it. I want to join that. And he kind of indicated to me, "No, that's not for you." And so at that, we sailed, and uh, we continued to the left. And the next thing I know, I'm slammed. I mean, I didn't enter gently. I was slammed back into my body, and I rebooted almost like a computer, like a whoop. And here I was. And I woke up on the couch. I was slumped over. Um, I kept trying to sit up, but I kept falling over. And at the time, I didn't realize I had had a stroke, which ultimately saved my life, because the blood clotting there at the site of what I had was a vertebral artery dissection. It actually saved me.
Right.
Most people aren't so fortunate, but I was able to call my father-in-law, who was right across the street, and he was in my living room within 60 to 90 seconds, and I was on my way to the hospital to get help.
Wow. Mindy, do you have any idea, subsequent in your own thoughts, to the length of human time, Earth time, that whole experience that you've just described took?
I've been asked that before, and I couldn't tell you. I was expecting my husband home anytime. It was about 10 to 15 minutes later that he arrived. So it could have been a minute to 5 minutes. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, because I was home alone, and I know how long it seemed to me on the other side. It seemed like an eternity. But in Earth time, I have no clue.
Okay, so we're very grateful that you got to the hospital, you got the treatment that you needed. Presumably all was well physically. Did you, after that, I mean, you're coming to terms with your own physicality, your own health issues, but obviously this experience must have constantly been resonating in your mind.
Absolutely. It took 2 years for me to get a proper diagnosis. At the time, since we lived in such a remote location, the nearest hospital was 30 miles away. And when we got there, it was a small community hospital. So they were ill-equipped to diagnose me, treat me. They actually sent me home saying I had probably had a migraine. And so I fought with them for about 2 years on this. And finally, we sold our home, moved away from the family farm, and came back down to Oklahoma City. And that's where within 2 weeks, I was in with the proper doctor that put me in for the proper testing and said, "I don't know how you're here." I actually have a picture at the end of my book with the doctor showing me the picture that he took, the interventional radiologist, because he couldn't believe I was sitting there talking with him. So it took 2 years to get proper diagnosis and treatment. So during that 2 years, I kept having strokes, and they were telling me that I was having hemiplegic migraines, which mimic a stroke, which was not the case at all. So I was dealing with 2 years of very terrifying health conditions for which I was getting no help from the local hospitals and the local doctors. And it put me in such a state, Seán, where I struggled because I felt like I was constantly on the verge of death. And I remember spending a whole day, and I don't think I've ever revealed this publicly. I spent a whole day on my knees praying to God, saying, heal me or kill me, because I cannot live in this in between. I was so terrified of going back to the void. And I was so tired of fighting and living through the pain and the anguish of having multiple strokes and everything and not having any help. So 2 years of that was complete torment. And finally, after moving back to the city, I did get the help that I needed. So that then led to me going through counseling. I got hearing aids, which I had lost 90% of my hearing during the dissection. Um, so I went to counseling for PTSD. It helped with the physical side, but then I started digging into the spiritual side, and that's where I found ions.
Well, let's talk about that, because we've had people on this show, Mindy, who've had spoken about the near-death experiences, and they have obviously put it into very much a Christian framework, and often seen it as a positive experience. Your story is slightly different, even though you come from a Christian background,
Yeah.
in that you've kind of linked this now to the whole UFO encounter experience, contactees or whatever. How did that come about? How did that sort of linkage come about in your own case?
Well, so about a year after we moved back here to the city, I ended up having another dissection. I ended up back in the hospital, but this time with good treatment and good care. And so I was in the neuro step down unit. My blood pressure was hovering around 40 over 20. So I was in very critical condition. And I started talking to my husband and saying, I won't survive another one of these. And I said, let's start making funeral arrangements. Let's make plans, because I want these people to be in my children's lives. And I want, these songs played at the funeral. And he said, okay, I will do that. But what do you want to do with the time we have? And I said, I want to go to Roswell. So that's how everything changed. We ended up going to Roswell. I was still passing out every day. I was in horrible health, and we didn't know if I was going to pull through, but we went there, and it was the first time I had been to a convention like that. And I ended up meeting Kathleen Martin, who has become a really good friend of mine now. Um, she ended up introducing me to UFO investigations and said, why don't you get involved? And I thought, you know what, I could do this. Most of it's online. And so even if my health is crap, I can be at home and I can research things. And so I loved it. I immediately signed up, got involved, and started doing investigations. Well, the organization I was with at the time, they had an experiencer team. And I was one of the investigators on the experiencer team. And Seán, as I started talking to people that have had abduction encounters, their transformation afterwards was so parallel to what mine was after my NDE. And I thought, am I crazy? Am I just seeing connections where there is none? Well, I, at the time, was actually reading the, um, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's Whitley Strieber's book.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, communion.
and do what?
Communion, I think it's called.
Yeah, so at the time I was reading Communion by Whitley Strieber, and in it he has this very intimate moment where he's assessing what he had been through. And it almost echoed exactly my words relating to my time in the void. And so again, it was just sign after sign was leading me down this road. And I said, okay, if there's a connection, someone smarter than me has seen this before. And so I start looking it up. Well, I ended up coming across Dr. Kenneth Ring and the Omega Project. And that was the big wow moment for me.
You might, Mindy, just want to explain a little bit for the audience who he was and what that project, particularly its significance.
Yes. So Dr. Kenneth Ring was a professor, and he was out at the University of Connecticut back in the 90s. And he actually was focused on investigating near death experiences. And one of his colleagues actually gave him Whitley Strieber's book and said, "This guy sounds a lot like your near death experiencers." And at the time, Dr. Ring said, "I don't do UFOs, but I'll humor you." So he did. He read through it and he said, "You know what? I think my colleague has a point here." So he set up the Omega Project, where he did an entire study of near death experiencers and UFO experiencers to see if there was any connection he could draw between them. And what he came to was two major conclusions. Number one is that there was an encounter prone personality. And seemed on both sides of the aisle. These were people that were not fantasy prone. He, in his line of questioning, was able to rule that out. These weren't people that were, as kids, out fighting dragons and stuff. They tend to lack that imagination. They instead seem to be connecting with a different kind of realm. And I very much fit that mold. When I was reading through his book, I said, okay, yeah, that was me as a child. A lot of them almost went into meditative states, not realizing it. And some of it is linked to childhood trauma and where we would put our minds in other spaces, almost as a form of protection. Mine was a lot related to my genetic condition, which was so painful. And so I had, at an early age, taught myself how to meditate. I had no idea what I was doing, but these were things common within that first set of people that were encounter prone, and it tended to be on both sides of the aisle. Then on the other side of it is the set of after effects. And so both sets, even if they had a terrifying kind of encounter, like myself, they come to terms with it, and it tends to transform them and transforms their thinking and their way of experiencing our lives. And that was very much true for myself as well. And I've heard it echoed through so many UFO experiencers who may have had a terrifying encounter on the front end, but they come to a realization or an acceptance that this is for a greater good, or there is a bigger world out there. They tend to see the bigger picture, and they just see their encounter as a part of that process. That was very much true for myself, where at first I had such anxiety around where I went. I now understand that it is exactly what I needed to put me on the path that I needed to be on. And I totally believe that my place is to be speaking with UFO experiencers, because I understand, not from their point of view, but I understand being taken out of your physical environment. I understand being met with an unknown entity. I understand it from a different point of view, where we can really find common ground. And I'll tell you, the team I work with now are some of the most amazing people on this planet. They are the earth changers. They have such a heart for humanity and wanting to change things for the better. So it always ends up being a positive in the end.
Do you feel the journey you've been on, Mindy, has this conflicted with your Christian belief?
Oh, that's a tough question. I have gotten some pushback from the Christian community. Uh, I'll tell you, it took me 2 years to tell my husband. I was well aware of what had happened to me, and I did not know how to tell him first that I had a near-death experience that we didn't believe in. And second, that I didn't go to heaven. That was the hardest hurdle right there. But thankfully, I have an amazing husband who said, let's figure this out together. He's the least judgmental person I've ever met. And I know now, looking at near-death experiences, nearly 80% of people, their marriages end in divorce because they change so much. Thankfully, I wasn't part of that statistic because my husband is the hero of the story, really. He loved me through it, and we researched through it. And I have come to encompass and incorporate new beliefs, I will say, that don't conflict with Christianity. In fact, what I encountered on the other side gives me such a much more immense respect for who Jesus was that I could never have comprehended before. If he literally was source in the flesh, there's no way we can comprehend who he was, who he truly was. But I think that it's just a part of a bigger picture. There are so many stories from around the world and so many traditions that I've looked into the beginnings of Earth with none and chaos and things beginning out of darkness. I don't think I was any kind of judgment. I don't feel that in my spirit at all. I believe what was revealed to me was meant for me. And that's exactly where I was supposed to be.
Well, unfortunately, Mindy, we have come to the end of our time together. Tell people where they can find out more about you, the bureau that you're involved in, and also where they can pick up a copy of your book.
Yes, they can find our work for the UFOs on internationalUFObureau.com. And we've just been resurrected in the last year. This is a bureau that was started back in 1957 by Hayden Hughes. And so we have a whole list of archives that we're about to make available to the public. So I'd encourage your audience to go check it out. And then also, if they want to find my book, it's called Dying to Meet Them, One Woman's Incredible Journey from NDE to UAP. And they can find that on Amazon.com.
Mindy, I feel this is the first of probably a series of conversations. But for now, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you so much, Seán, and thank you to your audience.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.